Okay, hi everybody. This topic is going to continue kind of what we started earlier with colonization in general, but this one is going to focus on English colonization because that is, of course, where America's origins come from. So that's going to be a really huge theme of the AP test and just understanding America's origins in general. We have officially entered Unit 2, Module 2, Period 2, however way you want to call it. And so let's dive right in. Oh, also, I wanted to go just a little bit slower because I really want you guys to be doing handwritten notes because there's just so much value to writing these things down. It helps your memory of these topics when you're writing them down. You're interacting with it more. So as you're watching this lecture, make sure that you have some sort of paper out, maybe a little binder of some sort, so all your notes can stay together. Stay organized. That will help you later when we review for the AP test. So again, be writing things down, pause things if you need to. If I'm going too fast, make sure that your notes make sense. Okay, so this is English colonization of the New World. Okay, you know that I'm cheesy and I ask you to pause, I ask you to think, I ask you to dwell. So please, at this point in time, please pause this video and refresh your memory. What do you know about Spanish colonization? What do you know about French colonization? So pause this and see how much you can remember about those two types of countries and their colonization efforts. Okay, I hope you did it. We'll talk about this maybe on Flipgrid or on some other discussion, but we really need to keep these three countries in our minds, understanding that they do have similarities of why they came over to the New World, but they also have distinct differences between them. And often they're compared, often there's a writing assignment. So I'm dropping some serious hints right now. You have to know the similarities and the differences between these three countries and how they colonized the New World, because they do have some major differences. Here we go. English is, of course, going to be our focus for today. So, English colonization. Look right here in the greenish little thing I wrote right here. Christopher Columbus came in 1492, and other Spanish conquistadors came shortly after. But the English didn't come until 1607. That's a really long time. That's a huge gap for Spain to be conquering and colonizing the New World, and England for them to not be doing any of that. So there has to be a reason, right? So why did it take England 100 years to finally send people over to colonize the New World? Well, they were having a lot of religious conflicts within their own country, and they were suffering from an economic depression. Internal conflicts and a depression would definitely lead you to not be focusing on expanding, to not be sending money away to some experiment. You're going to want to fix those issues first before you want to expand your country. So that's why it took England so long to join the rest of the party of Spain and France. Okay, so why does England want to colonize the New World? Well, at this time, they're competing with Spain for being the most powerful country in Europe. England is pretty powerful. Spain is also really powerful. France is powerful too. So, of course, competition is going to drive them. What are they competing over? It has gone around the world that Spain has found gold. So, of course, England wants a piece of that. Sugar also makes a lot of money, so they're hoping to maybe cultivate that more. And although both of these religions have a lot of similarities within them, there was still a battle over Catholicism and Protestant Christianity. And so England is going to want to spread their Protestant Christianity as opposed to Spain trying to spread their Catholicism. So again, there's even competition for, the gold, God, and glory, the three G's. There's even competition in the God part as well. Okay, the next bullet point. So England did not have the financial stability or the financial means to just throw away money and send a bunch of people to the New World. The kings and the queens and the monarchy, they are not funding these trips. In Spain, they are funding the trips. The country is paying for people, conquistadors, to come over and to colonize the New World. That is not happening in England. In England, they have something called joint stock companies. Okay, so make sure you write this one down and star it. It's kind of exactly what it sounds like. Companies in England are funding explorers, they are funding colonizers. Now, these companies are not just doing it out of the goodness of their heart. These companies are funding people to come to the New World to find something, to find an item, to find a commodity that they can sell and they can make money. So this is purely economic benefit. Most of the people that are coming to the New World in the very beginning are coming from joint stock companies. They've been employed by a company to go find gold. Once they find that gold, the company will help them pay for them to come back and they'll sell that gold. Okay? It's all a way for the joint stock companies to make money. Okay? Now, there's a story, and you'll learn more about this maybe in your note card, but there was a colony that wasn't really a part of this, but it's the Roanoke colony. That's technically our first English colony, but it failed. And it's kind of a mystery. Obviously, technology was not like what it is today. We don't exactly know what happened. We don't know what happened to all the people. We don't know what happened to the ship. For all we know, that it's, they're still there and they're ghosts and they're haunting the lands. But I don't know. But it's a failed mystery. So technically, that is our first colony. Feel free to research that and email me for extra credit if you want. But our first successful colony was funded, again, joint stock company, was funded by the Virginia Company. Okay. And the Virginia Stock Company sent people and they called it Jamestown. This is our first successful English colony. Now, we almost were not successful. Look at this. We were supposed to find gold. Okay, Spain had found gold. We're supposed to find gold. But what's kind of crazy is that these people that were sent to the Americas, they were so focused on finding gold that, like what I said here, they started actually starving and almost starving to death. They didn't really know how to farm very well, and they weren't focusing on that. They were focusing on their one job, which is to find gold so that the joint stock companies are happy. And there's no gold in Jamestown, Virginia. There's none. And so they were starting to freak out, and they literally almost died. But look at this. Of course, once they enter into the New World and in North America, they interact with different Native Americans. And keep in mind, the English colonizers, right when they're landing, right when they're there, they're kind of vulnerable. Again, they're looking for gold, they're very weak, and they don't really know how to farm very well. And so the Native Americans actually reach a helping hand to the colonists. And they help them farm and they help them plant and they basically save their life. So obviously just dwell on that for a second. The fact that Native Americans helped out English colonists. And if they didn't help, maybe the English colonists would have given up. Maybe they would have sent the message back to England that, hey, there's no gold on the East Coast. This is a worthless effort. Let's not do this anymore. And maybe United States of America would have never been created. Maybe thousands of Native Americans would have still lived. Who knows? But it is a crazy moment in history to look back at this one tribe, the Powhatans, and say they helped the English colonists, and then all these other things happened. So what happened? We have some famous colonists that you've heard of before. You can look up which one actually married Pocahontas and which one didn't in the Disney film in real life. But let's focus on this stuff with Jamestown. Again, they're trying to find gold. They find a different type of gold. This is not the gold that you are picturing, but it is gold to them in regards to money. They found a magical plant, tobacco, and they realized, wow, this can actually, it's addicting, and this thing can sell us a lot of money in the old world. So they are going to grow it in the new world. If they've never like had this plant in the old world before. So they're super excited to take this back to their joint stock companies. This will bring money in, and this will make their colony successful. And obviously it does. This is a huge cause and effect moment right here, though. Okay. Tobacco is a very difficult plant to cultivate. Okay. It's a very difficult plant to grow. And so it's a direct cause and effect. Because tobacco is the main crop in Jamestown, they need more laborers. And not that many people are going to sign up to do this type of hard labor, but there's going to be two types of people that the colonists are going to get to do this labor, and that is indentured servants and slaves. And on a separate assignment right after this, you will be looking at what indentured servants are and who slaves are, and just picking out 3 similarities and 3 differences. Feel free to write that down also in your handwritten notes as well. But it's important to know that when English colonization started, we had 2 major groups that were made up our labor force: indentured servants and slaves. There will be a big turning point when America stops using indentured servants and chooses to use slaves. But for right now, the English colonists in America are using both field laborers, both groups. And you'll see they have a lot of the same kind of jobs and duties. Main thing is, of course, going to be farming, the hard labor of the tobacco. And then later on, the hard labor of cotton, also a difficult plant. Okay. So this is huge. I just want to make sure you get it down again, because tobacco is a difficult plant to harvest and cultivate. That's why it needed these types of laborers. Maybe if we would have found gold, maybe if we would have found something else, maybe we wouldn't have had these labor forces. I don't know. Okay, this is the assignment you'll be doing on your own, comparing and contrasting indentured servants. If you've already done it, feel free to pause the video here and just test yourself. Do I know the difference? Do I know what indentured servants are? Do I know what slaves are? Okay. And then this is also an assignment as well. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, we're going to dip into the 13 English colonies and kind of talk about them in groups. So one thing to note is that these are the original 13. You should probably know, I would hate to say you have to memorize all of these, but it's good to kind of have an idea of the 13 original colonies, kind of know where they are generally, because they're going to come up a lot, obviously. This is going to be the foundation of America. Right now, they are all English. They're all English colonies. They're just planted in America, but you know that this will be our first 13 states too. So that's why the names obviously sound familiar. And you might remember all of this from middle school, which I hope you do, because I kind of go through this little part a little fast. So try to memorize it if you can. Try to know where these colonies are, because they're going to be important going forward. Okay. These 13 colonies all develop their own personalities based on their region. So environment is huge. Just like for the Native Americans, environment kind of dictated what kind of society they had. It's same thing for the English colonists as well. Where they are geographically kind of creates a certain personality. So in this picture right here, you see all of the states in different colors, all different. But what we're going to focus on is kind of their groups. Okay, so as you can see, there's a key down here. New England colonies is our most northern group, middle colonies, Chesapeake colonies, and lower southern colonies. Okay, up at the top, New England, middle, Chesapeake, and southern. And I'll say this again, but sometimes when you look at 13 colonies maps, you'll see Chesapeake and southern as separate, and sometimes you'll see them just as southern. These two regions share a lot of things in common. So they will be grouped up as southern regions, but the Chesapeake were the first ones. Okay, Jamestown is right in here in Virginia. So Chesapeake got its name first, and then once these other colonies started to develop, they called them Southern, and then they eventually kind of just grouped them up in one big group. Okay, so this is another thing to break down. Write this one in your notes. So feel free to pause the video here. You can always look back at this picture or other pictures similar to it, but it is important that you know the colonies by their region. And again, I put Maryland and Virginia in the southern colonies, but I also put them down here as Chesapeake colonies. Okay, so feel free to copy down this chart in your notes. Okay, so when we're talking about English colonies, we have to talk about what their life was like, what their culture was like, both economically, socially, politically, and this is huge. Just like it's important to know how Spanish and French and English, it's important to know how they are similar and different. Same thing with the English colonies. It's important to know how the northern and the middle and the southern, how they are different and how they are similar. Because believe it or not, guys, this is actually from day one, from life in the colonies, this is where we get some of our fundamental differences between the North and the South. It's crazy to me that these differences emerge from the very beginning based on our geography, based on what types of people are living in there. These are going to be the foundations to why the North and South parts of America were so different, why they eventually led to the Civil War, and still to this day, the ways that America is divided can stem from origins like this. So again, I know this is super old information, and this is the very beginning. We're not even the United States of America yet, but you can already see these differences starting to brew and starting to impact what kind of country we are going to be. Okay, so let's dive in. The first group we're going to talk about is New England colonies at the very tip top. Right there. Okay, again, feel free to pause this video if you want to write it all down and then listen to my voice, or do it as you want, whatever you like. Okay. One of the biggest characteristics of the New England colonies is the fact that they migrated in families. Okay, in families. New England society was much more stable than other colonies. New England is mostly pretty much all Puritans. Okay, so these are religious people coming from England, and they are Puritans migrating as families. And I put a note right here. The first Puritans, called Pilgrims, they founded a certain area called Plymouth Rock, and they wanted a complete separation from the Church of England. So the Pilgrims are a little bit more extreme in that regard. They want to separate from the Church of England. Puritans are still trying to get away from the Church of England, but they don't want to separate completely. They want to purify it. They want to change some aspects of it. But definitely their reason for migrating to the New World is purely religious reasons. Okay. Look right here. Okay. Environment matters. Okay. Colonists lived longer in the New England region because they had more of a dispersed population. People kind of were spread out a little bit more. They had better, purer water, and they had a much cooler climate. You'll see in the other regions that that's not the case. And then, unfortunately, as with most things in history at this time, women were not considered equals. Women were mothers and wives, and they were religious and they were in the church as well, but they were not considered equal both socially, economically, or politically, or even religiously. Okay, the next major theme for New England is education. This is huge. New England towns regarded education as fundamental. It's a fundamental family responsibility. Education is super important. Keep in mind, they're the only region that is migrating as families. So they have kids, little kids, teenagers. And so that's why we get like the first elementary schools in the New World are created in New England because they're the only ones with like kids in the beginning. So hopefully that cause and effect makes sense. They're going to take local taxes from the towns, and that's what's going to go into the creation of the schools. So of course, these two things probably don't surprise you. New England had by far the highest literacy rate, so people can read and write in this region more than anything else in the American colonies. And then in 1638, look how early that is. Harvard became America's first college, and it is in Massachusetts, which is, of course, in the New England region. Okay, how do they make their money? So the New England colonies, the soil is too thin and rocky, and the climate is too harsh. It's too cold to grow cash crops. Cash crops are crops that you plant fully to make money. Like everybody at this time, like there's no grocery store, so everybody has to plant crops to like live. That's a no-brainer. But certain regions are going to plant cash crops. So they are planting fields and fields of tobacco or fields and fields of wheat for the purpose of selling them and making money for their family and for their region. Okay. So the economy is pretty bad in the north, the environment is pretty bad in the north, weather-wise. It's really cold. So people can still grow things for their own family, but they're not growing cash crops. So how are they making money? How are they making a living? New England is fishing, trees, forests, lumbering, fur trading, and metalworking. Okay? You have to memorize and you have to know these specific details per region because they are very different from each other. Okay, so this is what these guys do to make money. Okay, what's the hierarchy? Let me get all these things up. Okay, the social hierarchy. Feel free to draw this if you want in your notes. Who is most important and has most social and political power is at the top. And who is the least important, least powerful is at the bottom. Okay? So that's how these hierarchy triangles work. At the bottom, we have a small population of landless laborers, servants, and people that are poor. Okay? There's not really any slaves. And if they do have a slave, it might be a personal house slave, but it's not super common. It's not like they're anti-slavery. Some people are, but it's not like they are anti-slavery as a whole region. So they might still have a personal house slave or a personal indentured servant. Of course, like servants are here, but there's not that many of them. Okay, so a small population of powerless people at the bottom. In the middle, this is like the most of the population are just yeoman farmers, which just means like a typical farmer. Okay, so that's the majority, average person. And who's important in New England? They're super big on religion. They are like they're planted by Puritans. So of course, the most religious, the most devout, those people are going to be at the top. The ones that lead the town meetings, the ones that are leaders in the church, they are at the top as most important. Okay. This thing in blue or teal or whatever that is very important for New England. Their churches focused on its members, and outsiders were not welcomed and often moved away. So New England is super big on the Puritan faction of Protestantism, Christianity, but so much so that if you're not in agreement with them, if you're not on their team, on their side, then they do kick people out, and they do shut people out. So you'll hear of that happening quite a bit in the New England region. The most one you'll hear it from is actually this one right here. Okay, so a very famous colony in the New England region is the Massachusetts Bay Colony. They have a nickname. It's called a city upon a hill. The Puritans established it in the 1630s. So this is, again, 20 years after Jamestown. They have one of the first governors, like in all the regions, but definitely their first governor is super famous, and his name is John Winthrop. I'll read the third point. They urged Native Americans to live in praying towns established by English authorities for converted Native Americans and to adopt the Puritan emphasis of the centrality of the Bible, aka they're trying to convert Native Americans to their religion, and that's one of their missions and one of their desires as a region and as a colony. But as they were doing this and taking land from Native Americans and trying to force them into their religion, there's this guy right here. He's freaking awesome. His name is Roger Williams. He was sympathetic to Native Americans. He wanted to treat them differently than most of the people around him. And he actually wanted to pay Native Americans for the land that they were taking, which was super countercultural. Most of the English colonists were just taking land from these Native Americans without any contracts, without any money. And Roger Williams wanted to do it maybe a more legal way, maybe a better way, in his opinion. He also wanted to completely separate from the Church of England. And so he ended up getting banished, getting kicked out of the Massachusetts Bay Colony, and he ended up creating his own colony, which is Rhode Island. Okay. Another person that got kicked out of the Massachusetts Bay Colony is this lady right here. Her name is Anne Hutchinson. She believed that you do not need to wait for a pastor or a priest or someone else to read the Bible for you, to speak to God for you, that whole idea. And so she actually believed that God could talk directly to any person. So you can have direct revelation with God. And for that crazy thought, she was also banished. And she actually, for a time, went to Rhode Island too. I thought this was funny. I don't know if funny is the right word to use, but here's the Massachusetts Bay Colony seal. And it has an Indian in the middle. And the phrase says, "Come over and help us." Okay. Yeah. So I don't know. I just think it's comical. This is obviously made by the Massachusetts Bay Colony people. And it's emphasizing that they are here for good things and that the Native Americans need them to help them and to take over their land and kill them and convert them and all that fun stuff. So this is obviously not showing the full truth of what's going on in the Massachusetts Bay Colony, but it does show you kind of their perspective of what they are doing during this time. Okay. Here's a situation that's going to happen with the Massachusetts Bay Colony and the Native Americans. So this is the Massachusetts Bay right here. Massachusetts, okay. But as you can see, there's a lot of other names on here that maybe you have never seen before, or never heard of before. Remember that when they are coming, when the English colonists are coming and staying in the East Coast right here, they are obviously landing in tribal lands that where Native Americans live and that they have made their societies and made their lives. So it's no difference with the Massachusetts Bay Colony. They are right in the thicket of all these different tribes and all these different native populations. And as the Massachusetts Bay and Massachusetts is going to grow, they will obviously kick Native Americans out. They will kick them this way, okay? They will kick them west. And if they don't go willingly, there might be some violence in there too. So King Philip's War happened in 1675 to 1676. Due to colonial expansion, one of the chiefs, his name is Metacom, and he also has an English name, King Philip. Okay, he declared war on the English settlers in the Massachusetts Bay Colony. Wampanoag is the name of his tribe. They're the leading tribe, but they also have all these other tribes with them. They are going to be fighting and starting this war. They destroyed and burned and just took down a lot of Puritan towns in the whole Massachusetts and kind of a lot of New England region areas. So they're definitely coming in with this anger, okay? Obviously, again, due to colonial expansion. The English in this region and with their Native American allies that they've become friends with, they fought back and they actually defeated Metacom's tribe. But the meaning of this war, or why it's significant, is because when colonization is starting, you'll see in a different assignment that Native Americans had no idea what to think of English colonists. They didn't know if they could be friends, if they can work things out. They are foreign to each other, and they didn't really know how to respond to one another. Some Native Americans from the get-go were skeptic and fearful, but some Native Americans were extending friendship to English colonists. And likewise, some English colonists were seeking friendship, but that was rare. Most English colonists were here to claim their land, to colonize it, and to expand. And if Native Americans weren't cooperating, then they would get angry. So this war is one of the first wars where Native Americans fight back. So look at this turning point. Native Americans are now described as bloodthirsty savages because they are coming off as very violent. They are now viewed in a very, very negative light as bloodthirsty savages. And so hatred just begins to spread intensely, and it's actually just going to get worse and worse and worse. And for extra credit, I'll post it somewhere else in this module. The song Savages in the Disney movie Pocahontas, it's really violent, and it's from both sides, but it just shows a lot of hatred and racist ideas from both sides, colonists and Native Americans. And it all comes from this fear and misunderstanding of one another. So extra credit assignment if you have the time, if you want to look into more of what happened between colonists and Native Americans. Okay, Chesapeake and Southern colonies. So again, I'm kind of grouping these guys together. You can see right here, okay, they're geographically right next to each other. So these guys are first. Jamestown, Virginia, right, 1607 right there. Maryland is the next one to be developed, 1632. I'm sorry, there's other ones up here, but I'm talking about these right here. So these two get created. Chesapeake, they have their own identity. Then it takes a while, but these guys come along and then they kind of get grouped up into the same region, okay? So families in the Chesapeake, there's not really families, but what kind of people are in the Chesapeake region? 70 to 85% of immigrants, people coming from England to the New World, are young male indentured servants. Again, I hope you've done the assignment by now. If not, pause this video, go do the indentured servants assignment so you know who these people are. Some of them are criminals. Some of them have a history and a past. They want to start over for some reason. But 70 to 85% of people in the Chesapeake region are young male indentured servants. Unfortunately, this area has a very high death rate. That could be to the environment, it could be to the labor that they're doing, but a lot of people die a lot sooner than the New England region. If 85% of these people are men, there's a very small number of women and in this region, and they're actually very vulnerable. They were subject to sexual exploitation often. Childbearing was very dangerous, and Chesapeake women died 20 years earlier than women in New England. So again, not family units, not like New England at all. We have a completely different environment happening in the Chesapeake and in the southern regions. Who is important? Let's look here. Oh, sorry. Okay, again, this is not like population, even though in this one it kind of works out in this way, but it's talking about societal importance or who has power, okay? So these people at the top have the most social and political and economic power, and the people at the bottom have the least amount. Okay, but it also works out in this case of like number-wise too. At the very bottom, we have the most of the population. A lot of them are going to end up being African slaves, but they also are going to be the ones with the least power in this group. Right here, we have indentured servants, which are one group higher than slaves. They still are not treated very well. They're still very powerless, but there is a distinction in the Chesapeake region between indentured servants and slaves. And once you do that assignment on the differences between them, you'll see that indentured servants do get some benefits rewards as slaves do not. Okay. Right here, we have the largest class in the beginning, and then it becomes a lot of slaves too. But we have a lot of farmers. Okay, some of them came as indentured servants, and then once their time was done, they just became an average farmer. But again, a lot of them are very poor. They are living based on what they grow and what they can sell. But this is not a rich area. Okay, the rich at the very tip top, these are the people that own the tobacco plantation, who are employing the farmers, who have the indentured servants, who have the slaves. So these are the plantation owners at the top. Again, a plantation is a big property that the family usually lives on, and the slaves live on, the indentured servants live on, and they just work the land. And it's acres and acres and acres of land producing something, and in this case, tobacco. Then there's one more group that is super important in the Chesapeake region, and that is the House of Burgesses, I think is how you pronounce it. Sometimes I say House of Burgers, but these people are the political elite. So they are leading the way. This is one of our first governments, which we'll talk about later, but the House of Burgesses is super important. This is, again, one of our first representative governments. People that are allowed to vote, people that are allowed to be a part of this political process. These are their leaders. Okay, the next group are middle colonies. Whoa, I did not, where was it? Huh, I'm so sorry. Can you guys add in your notes that the way that these guys make money is tobacco? Okay, I don't know why I didn't put it on there. It's going to be cash crops, and it's going to be tobacco. It'll turn into cotton as well, but the Chesapeake colonies is all about growing cash crops, making that money, tobacco, cotton, wheat later, but mostly tobacco and cotton. Okay, man, so sorry I don't have a slide on that. I kind of have this, but that's a lame slide. I'm sorry. Okay, boom, boom, boom. Okay, middle colonies. It's these guys right here. Perfect. Sorry if you can hear my dog bark. Okay. Middle colonies have a nickname of the bread basket of the colonies. Kind of funny. It's just kind of what they make. It's corn, wheat, and fruit. So it's nothing too labor intensive like tobacco and cotton that would need a lot of slave labor. It's kind of just maybe quote unquote normal commodities, corn, wheat, and fruit. That's how they're going to make their money. The first colonists were actually Dutch, so they actually called it New Amsterdam in the beginning, and then we later changed it to New York. So they actually have Dutch origins, but then the Dutch will leave, and England will kind of take more control. Okay. This is interesting. The middle colonies, a lot of them started off as proprietary colonies, which means private individuals owned these properties. So instead of joint stock companies, or instead of like the church owning certain areas, certain people could own certain areas. So we'll talk about William Penn later. He's going to be the founder of Pennsylvania, which is obviously a state today, you guys know. So again, private ownership. The middle colonies are more ethnically diverse, and religiously tolerant. We'll talk about that in a second. Their goal was simple: to farm, to make money. The land is way more fertile than New England, so they're going to make these cash crops, like I said before. Their relationship with Native Americans is going to be better than the other two regions. And then I kind of mentioned, sorry, this is twice, that this area is more ethnically diverse. So copy on this chart into your notes. I think it just simplifies it really well. A couple of points really well. Of the colonies, both the middle New England and then the Chesapeake and Southern, it's going to compare their religious freedom, and then it's going to compare their ethnic composition. So we've already looked, let's look at the ones we've already talked about. Obviously, you guys know New England is super strict on their religion. Chesapeake, okay, they're not focusing on religion, but they do have religious people there. So you can be Anglican, you could be Catholic. That's about it for right now. Let's look at ethnic composition. New England is obviously least diverse. We're going to have a bunch of English families, some Native Americans, and some Africans in the area. Same thing with Chesapeake and Southern. We have a lot of Africans, English, and Native Americans, but middle colonies. Religious freedom. You can be a citizen in the middle colonies as long as you are Protestant religious, Protestant Christian. But if you're any type of Protestant, you're welcome. Ethnic composition, 49% English, but there's also Germans and French and Dutch and Scottish and Irish and Africans in here. So it's the most ethnically diverse group as well. Okay, William Penn in Pennsylvania. This is a quick story on them. William Penn is actually a Quaker, very famous Quaker. And this area, it's going to be, what's I going to say? Oh, shoot, I lost my train of thought. I'm sorry. They're called the Religious Society of Friends. Okay, the Quakers were religiously persecuted, meaning that they were treated differently, that they might have been violently harmed for being different than the Church of England. They got their name because when they feel like they, look up how they got their name if you're curious, okay? They believed everyone has the light of God in them, so they actually have a lot of foundations of equality. You'll see two big things right here in Pennsylvania. Women can preach in the church. That is huge. Oh my gosh, that's crazy for this time period that women have that equality, that ability to have a leadership position in preaching in church. Pennsylvania was a safe haven for religious dissenters and mostly Quakers. They were pacifists, meaning that they don't believe in violence. So they were originally peaceful with Native Americans. That didn't last forever. But hey, in the beginning, they were more friendly with Native Americans. And last but not least, this is a huge one, Pennsylvania. We see one of our first foundations of anti-slavery. So I cannot wait to tell you guys about the whole story of how slavery gets the people that spoke up against slavery before it was the cool thing to do. And a lot of it does come from religious origins. Okay, this rebellion is really big. This is going to be a major turning point. So remember, you've done your assignment on indentured servants and slaves. Okay? Again, if you haven't done that, pause this video, go do that assignment, and come back. Bacon's Rebellion is going to be a very important rebellion happening in Virginia. Former indentured servants living in the Virginia frontier suffered due to poor tobacco prices and Indian attacks. Okay, so they were not getting the benefits that they were due, and there was a lot of Native American attacks towards indentured servants. These farmers, who were indentured servants but now are farmers, they blamed the governor, who's not really helping them. Nathaniel Bacon, the guy who the rebellion's named after, he led a rebellion in 1676 against the governor and was joined by some farmers, some indentured servants, some African Americans, and some women. This rebellion, unfortunately, it ended after Bacon died, but the rebellion convinced the Virginia gentry that indentured servants were destined to become rebellious, and that African slaves were a better solution than rebellious whites because slaves had no ambition for political power. Guys, this is super sad, and this is very important to our story. As you guys know, until now, we have had indentured servants and slaves. As you know from the assignment, indentured servants eventually get their freedom from doing an amount of years of work, let's say 7. After 7 years of having no rights and no power, indentured servants get to be officially free. They can be a farmer, they can have property, they can have their own farm, they can make their own money, they can eventually vote, and they have power. They're white men, indentured servants, and they have this idea that I am maybe, quote unquote, a normal citizen. As you know, African slaves do not get that sense of freedom or that sense of ownership or power. They stay in that labor state forever. And so Bacon's rebellion, although it was mostly a rebellion of former indentured servants, it still showed the Virginia government and the Virginian leaders that indentured servants are going to always rebel. They're going to always want more. And why would we have indentured servants still if we can have slaves? So, sadly, this is the major turning point that leads the American colonists to mostly rely on slaves. You may see an occasional indentured servant, but now we've made the switch. Okay, this picture, I want you in a moment to pause the video, and I want you to stare at this picture for a minute or so. And I want you to guess at what you're looking at. You can probably see it pretty well. Maybe you've already seen this picture before. But does this picture stir up any emotions? Do you know what this picture is showing? Do you know maybe the deeper message behind this picture? So feel free to pause this video and kind of look at this picture a little bit more. Okay, I hope you paused the video. This picture is a picture of a slave ship. Okay, potentially 2 different floors of the same ship, and all of these images right here are slaves. The thing that should disturb you about this image is how closely the slaves are diagrammed to fit in the ship. This ship does not look like it is transporting people. It looks like it's transporting commodities, items, merchandise. This is the unfortunate reality of what the slave trade is going to be and how slavery is going to be such a foundation to our country and how we became such a rich country. And how the colonies were able to succeed the way that they were is because of this type of labor that we are bringing into our country. As you can see right here, this is a flat diagram. So this image already should be disturbing to you of how many people we're packing in. But I want you to take this image in your mind and I want you to make it kind of 3D. Because like these people are laying down, they would pack these slave ships in bunk beds kind of, but like 3 or 4 people up. So take this whole row and now add another layer and another and another. Again, this is inhumane. They are not being treated like humans. They are being treated as if they were merchandise. And you can see that again here in the triangular trade. This is items to items to items. So I have a question right here. It says, what is disturbing about this system? Look at the triangular trade. Here we go. We're starting from America, the New World, okay? Items going from the New World to the Old World to Europe are sugar, tobacco, and cotton, okay? These are cash crops. These are being sold to the Old World. From the old world to Africa are textiles like t-shirts, like manufactured goods, rum, and weapons or other manufactured goods are being sold to Africa. Now, what is being bought from Africa and taken to the New World are slaves. So this is the triangular trade. Okay, you already know the Columbian exchange. That's just between the New World and the Old World. But the triangular trade are items, human beings. So again, from the foundation of what's going to make these colonies successful is the exploitation of human beings being sold for rum, and they will produce items like sugar and cotton and tobacco. So again, triangular trade, very disturbing system. Okay, we're almost done. The last kind of major concept that we have to go over, again, deals with money. So the commercial empire. Okay, as you can see, maybe going back between all three regions, based on the environment and based on the region, they are developing and cultivating different items to make money. So there's a lot of diversity with these 13 English colonies and what they make and how they make their money. But let's look at what happened in the very beginning, okay? So 1607 is when Jamestown was planted, and it was the first successful English colony. Awesome. But what's unique about England is the Joint Stock Company sent these people over, right? And then they kind of forgot about them. So the fancy word is called salutary neglect. So for about 50 years after the first successful colony, England is going to kind of not pay attention to the colonies. Remember, the colonies are not state funded, meaning England, their monarchy, is not paying for these colonies, and they are not protecting these colonies. So believe it or not, as these colonies are expanding and growing, and as England is forgetting about them, like a lot of stuff is happening, but England's not paying attention. So I want you to pause the video right here, and I want you to think, what are some positive and negative benefits that could occur now that England is neglecting the colonies? So think about right here. What are some good things that could come out of this time period? England has people in the New World, has people in America. What are some good things that England's not really paying attention to them? What are some bad things? We're going to have a discussion about this in either Flipgrid or on Canvas, but think about some negative or positives. Obviously, don't forget about them forever, though. Okay, in 1660, Charles II, which is the English king at the time, he wakes up and says, "Whoa, I have all these colonies in America. I need to take advantage of this situation." So this is when England introduces mercantilism as something full-fledged, like full power. They're going to try to get as much money as they can from these American colonies. So that's where we enter in mercantilism. Mercantilism is an economic system to increase a nation's wealth by government regulation of all the nation's commercial interest. So mercantilism is going to make England rich by England controlling everything that the colonies are making and selling. So England wants more money. England wants to control the trade. England doesn't want any competition, and England wants a stronger navy. So what is England going to do? What is their mercantilism going to have? Like, how is it going to affect the colonies? Big star right here. England issues some laws. They're called the Navigation Acts, and there's two of them. One of them is in 1660. One of them is in 1663. Look at these laws. No ship could trade in the colonies unless the ship was made in England. So you have to trade on English ships. Obviously, English people are going to be running those ships, and so they want to really control what is coming out of the colonies. They want their eyes on that. Okay, look at this one. Numerated goods, which are tobacco, sugar, cotton, rice, rosin, and tar, could only be sent to English ports. So you can sell to other countries, but you have to first take those items, take tobacco in an English ship, and you have to take it to England first, probably pay for a tax or a fee, then you can sell to other countries. So again, England is just saying, whoa, I'm sorry, I forgot about my colonies over there. Now I'm going to take more control and make more money off of what they're growing. And right here, I already said this one, goods shipped to English colonies must pass through England. So if any goods are happening or like are being sold to the colonies, those items have to pass through England. So this is huge. So by 1700, we have a very different situation in the colonies. England's attitude towards the colonies has changed dramatically. By 1700, the sectional differences, meaning between New England, Middle, and Southern, they are very different. Okay, some of them have been around for 100 years, some of them have been around for 50 years, but regardless, by 1700, these colony regions are super different from one another. I mean, they mostly came from England, but other than that, they don't really have that many similarities. So it's going to be really interesting when certain conflicts are going to come up in a second. But just keep in mind, England has a tighter grip on their colonies. Again, we're not the United States of America yet. We are still England's property. And so they're definitely trying to take advantage of that in a good way. And then the sections are super different from one another. So I know that was a really long video lecture, but this is a huge, big part of our Unit 2, Module 2, is understanding the English colonies and understanding all the different regions and all their differences, mostly based on environment. So feel free to rewatch this lecture. Hopefully you went through it slowly. Hopefully you wrote down all your notes, because then you're going to be taking a quiz on this lecture shortly. Okay? So with that, you are all done on English colonization.